Good morning and welcome to our Fairy Garden Workshop. My name is Kelly Stry and I am one of the 4-H Extension educators in Wright County. I'd like to welcome Liz Paetow with us as well. She is our instructor this morning. Liz has had lots of experience with online learning. She led our virtual baking classes a few weeks ago and did a great job. And she offered to share her knowledge about fairy gardens. And so we hope you can learn from her. Before we get started though, I just want to remind you, answer those poll questions if you are able to. And if you have any questions throughout the workshop, you can type them in the chat box. If you're not familiar with where the chat box is, hover your screen along the bottom of the screen and you'll see the chat bubble and you can type them in there. And we will turn it over to Liz.
All right, good morning, welcome. Glad everybody is joining us here on this Saturday morning. Like Kelly said, it's probably going to rain, but we need it, so that's good. So I love to fairy garden. I probably started fairy gardening over 10 years ago. I worked with someone who was fairy gardening and she got me into it and it's kind of blossomed from there. I probably put together between 12 and 14 fairy gardens every year that are scattered about my yard. I have a couple of large fairy gardens outside that don't move. The other ones are all put into containers, and I'll show you some of the containers that I use. So a fairy garden can be put in a teacup, or a fairy garden can go in a wash tub. So you can make them as big or as little as you'd like. They're just fun to have. Fairies also come in various sizes. So we've got little guys like this that sit. We've got bigger fairies like this that come on a stand. So there are lots of them. I'm going to turn this down so we can start seeing things that I'm showing. Some of the things you can purchase in gardening stores, or what I like to do is go to an antique store or even a garage sale. This is a house that's a fish house that I picked up at a garage sale, and it looks like it's for a fish aquarium, but I use it as a fairy garden because I think it looks like a castle. So it goes in one of my fairy gardens. There are mushrooms and benches. You know, you can make a whole house for your whole outdoor living area for your fairy gardens. And then I like to put animals. So I've got big and little animals. And the other thing that I like to do is, I know that you probably want to keep your dimensions, everything in there in your fairy garden in the right dimensions. So your fairy should be able to go in your house. It shouldn't be too big, or your animals shouldn't be bigger than your fairies, that kind of thing. But I don't pay attention a lot to that. I just like putting things in my fairy gardens and having fun with them. So, and then I have, so like I said, you can buy fairies in many different sizes and different things. My girlfriend went to Russia and she brought me back this neat little house. And so I like putting that in one of my fairy gardens. So, and then there are, you can use gates, you can use fences. So here's a gate that goes into one of my fairy gardens. So there's all kinds of fun things. So just look around your house. You can put little toys, let's see here. You can find things outside. I do have some fencing. I like to find this stick just has a little bit of moss on it. That's kind of fun that I just found out in the, if you go out into the woods and find neat little pieces of wood or pieces of moss or things that you can put into the fairy garden. And I like having water features. So I like having things that I can put a little bit of water in. So anything you can find can go into a fairy garden. So for containers, like I said, they can be anywhere from a teacup to a large wash tub outside. So I've got this little basket. Now this one doesn't have any holes in the bottom. Sometimes I'll have my husband put holes in the bottom. If you don't have any drainage holes, then you're going to want to put some rocks in the bottom. So you would just want to put a few rocks in the bottom so that you have something for drainage. That's one thing. I have this old green wash tub that I like to put things in, and I did have my husband put some holes in the bottom of this for me. And then I have this one today. This is just a round brown ceramic that I purchased at a garden store. This one does have a hole in the bottom, but it is quite large. It's a bigger hole, and so I don't want all my dirt to fall out. So I am actually going to put just a couple of rocks in the bottom to kind of cover that hole. The water will still be able to go through it, but it'll keep the dirt in. And those were just purchase rocks that I happen to have, but I'm sure you can go out into your yard and find rocks, or if you live on a farm, I'm sure that you're probably picking rocks out of the field and you'll be able to find all kinds of rocks. And if you do pick rocks and find things, make sure that you keep anything that looks interesting, anything that looks fun. Putting some rocks as a pathway in your fairy garden is a lot of fun. So like I said, be on the lookout all the time for different things and items that you can use in your fairy gardens. Most of my fairy gardens are outside. I do have a couple that I keep in around Easter time. So if you keep your fairy garden in the house, you probably want to make sure that you have a tray or something underneath it, so that when you water it, the water doesn't go all over. So you're going to want to make sure that you put it in something like that. So, but when I have them outside, I don't have them in anything. And most of the time I let the rain water them, but of course they're just like any other plants that you have outside. If it's not raining a lot, you're going to need to make sure that you water them. So I use just a Miracle-Gro potting soil. We're going to fill my container.
Hey Liz, we have a question for you.
Yep.
Can we just use soil from outside, or do we have to use potting soil?
You know, if you're going to have the fairy garden outside, I would think that you could just use the soil from outside. The reason I use potting soil is it's a little bit lighter than some of the dirt that you get from your field. You know, and it's a little finer of a dirt than what you find.
Okay, great.
But certainly.
All right, thank you.
I say use whatever you can find. So now this is flat. I have this flat, and a lot of my fairy gardens are flat and when I add things, that adds a little bit of dimension to them. But you could just pile this up at one end and kind of have a dip in it. So play with your dirt a little bit and make sure, figure out where you want to plant things or what you want to put things, where you want to put things. If you want a theme, I usually try to put together a baseball one that's kind of fun. I found a couple of baseball things, or if I find one that I like that's like I said, like my castle that is for under the water, I like to put maybe an underwater fairy with this. So think of a theme that you would like to have your fairy garden be. And then think about where you want to place different items in your fairy garden. Now, you can have one plant in your fairy garden. You can have 4 or 5 plants in your fairy. You can put as many plants in as you want to. And you can also have no plants. I've seen fairy gardens at the fairs that just have a lot of fun different items in them with maybe some plastic plants. But I like having real plants. And so I buy little plants. Set that just aside for a moment so I can show you. So I like buying little viney plants. A lot of them come in these little tiny pots that you can find. I thought this one was kind of fun. And you can find them that are different colors. This is a pretty green leaf with a red stem. So then you just want to decide where in your pot you're going to put your plants.
Liz, could you tell us where you find those plants? Some of them look awful small, and so I don't know that I've seen them in my greenhouse.
They're very tiny, and actually Butterfly Gardens has fairy plants like this, the little tiny ones. Gerton's has small ones. Otten Brothers.
Where's the Butterfly Garden location?
Butterfly Gardens is right here in Montrose.
Okay.
There's one in Montrose right on Highway 12. Otherwise, Otten Brothers in Delano. They don't have quite as many little ones there, but they do have some.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, the other place, I mean, if you want to go to the cities and go someplace that's a lot of fun, there's a nursery called Tonkadale that's down in Minnetonka, and she's got succulents like crazy, just table after table after table of succulents, and then she's got a few tables of these little plants. So to me, Tonkadale is probably my go-to place for fairy garden plants. She just has the best selection down there. But there are other places, and Walmart. Walmart has plants, some smaller plants and succulents too that work well for fairy gardens. The other thing that I like to do this time of year, of course, is at the nursery. This is just a little white alyssum, and then I've got a little smaller celosia, and I've got a little smaller dianthus. So these are small plants right now. They're going to get a little bit bigger in your fairy garden, but that's what makes the fairy garden kind of fun. You want some of the plants to grow a little bit bigger around some of the items that you placed in your fairy garden. So things like these aren't going to last all winter, but some of these plants that you put in your fairy gardens, you can bring them in the house. Take out the ones that are dying and bring these in the house, and you can have your fairy garden all winter. And a lot of times, some of these plants like this will get way too big, and I'll have to replant them as a house plant. But I don't know if your parents would like that, but I have a lot of house plants because I have a lot of fairy gardens plants that grew too big. So again, you've got your fairy garden, you just want to make sure that you're figuring out where you want to put the plants and what kind of things you want to put in your fairy garden. So we're going to put a little. The other thing that you want to be careful with is most of these plants that I'm going to put in here today take a lot of water. But if you're going to put succulents in a fairy garden, you want to make sure that that's all that's in your fairy garden is probably a couple of succulents, because they don't take as much water. You don't want to overwater them. So we'll put that one there. And how about if we put this nice vine? There. Oh, and let's see. And what I like to do is, so I know that this is going to get bushy. This vine is going to go down. So I think I'm going to put something that I know is going to get a little bit taller. So we'll put that there. Okay. So we've got some plants in our fairy garden now. And now we have to decide what we want to put in our fairy garden. So as I told you, I had a friend a few years ago that helped me get into fairy gardens. These are two of my very first fairies. So they're taller fairies, so they go out in one of my big ones outside. But that's some of my very first fairies that I ever got. So let's put we're going to put this walkway in there. And one of the things that is always in my fairy gardens is rabbits. I love rabbits, and so I end up with rabbits in all of my fairy gardens. So I'm gonna put this little chair over here. So, and I like mushrooms. The other thing that I like to put in, so you've got this nice walkway here, or this bridge. And so it's a bridge, so it's kind of supposed to be water flowing through or whatever. I don't have any blue rocks in the house right now, but I would take rocks or pebbles, or there's colored stones you can buy. We're going to pretend that there's a creek underneath our bridge. When I go on vacation or I go to museums and things, I like to find different things. So I went to a museum last summer, and it's down in Minneapolis, and it's called the Bell Museum of Natural History, and they have a huge woolly mammoth display. And so I thought the woolly mammoth was cute. So I bought a little one, and he's going to go in my fairy garden whether he should be or not. So I just like finding little things that when I go on vacation or when I go out and around, like I said, if they belong, they belong. If they don't, that's okay. I'm still going to put some in there. I have a colored stone here that we'll put on the edge of the walkway. And the other thing that I like to do is put her sitting in the chair over here. So she's watching everything. You can purchase green moss. This is a smaller bag, but you can find them in bigger bags. So this is like a green, looks like green grass. And so a lot of times I'll fill my fairy gardens in with moss. So I'm going to show you right now. This is a wheelbarrow, a child's wheelbarrow that I found at a antique store this winter, and I decided it would make the perfect fairy garden. Move it a bit here. Do it until we're not seeing it yet, are we? There we go. Can you kind of see it, Kelly?
Yes, we can see that. That's adorable.
So this is an old, like I said, an old child's wheelbarrow. And I purchased this house, and this house lights up, which is kind of fun. And but you can see that I've got that green moss all over the top of this. So, and this one will go outside now that the weather is getting ready for it. The problem with the green moss is I really enjoy it. I like it. But when it's outside, all summer, it is going to turn brown. So it'll only be green for a month or so, and then the sun is going to bleach it brown, but it's still nice to have. It's still fun to have. So what I have done when I showed at the county fair is I've actually taken the brown up and put fresh green down so that it looks fresher when you're showing it to your judge. Because you probably want to, if you want to show a fairy garden at the county fair, now is a good time to get started, because you want these plants to grow. You want to show that they've been there for a while and that you have taken care of them. And it really makes the fairy gardens more fun when the plants start to grow up and grow around things in your fairy garden. I think that's probably all I have. Do we have any other questions?
I just put that in the chat box. If anybody else has questions for Liz about fairy gardens, now's the time. I see someone, I asked the question of them earlier, what are your ideas for a theme for your fairy garden? And someone said an I Spy theme, or like a junkyard.
See, that's great.
I like that. Someone also said that they had made a fairy garden before with a chicken theme, and they had used a chicken watering can for their fairy garden.
Oh, see, that's great. That you can use anything for a fairy garden.
Someone does have a question. Where do you buy the fairies?
Again, Otten Brothers in Long Lake. So Otten Brothers in Long Lake has them. That Tonkadale that I like to go to. Otten Brothers right in Delano has a few. And she actually has some fairy garden kits there that are kind of cute. So they come with a fairy and some other things that you can put in your fairy garden. So those are kind of cute. I know that Cattail Corner in Howard Lake used to have some. I'm not sure what she's got for fairy gardens anymore. And then online, of course, you can go online and purchase any of these things.
Sure. Does a fairy garden have to include a fairy?
No. No, they do not.
You can have a woolly mammoth, right?
I have a woolly mammoth. Exactly.
Any other questions for Liz? Type them in the chat box. While you're thinking about that, I'm going to share another poll with you. So tell us a little bit about your fairy garden experience today online. So I'm glad you could all spend some time with us today. Yeah, so let us know if you have other questions for her. I know that she's very experienced with her fairy gardening, so now is the time to
Have
ask.
fun with it.
I think, Liz, what you said about it's a good time to start your fairy garden is really important because those plants do need to be established, and the county fair really is only, let's see, 2 months away. So that's a great time to do that.
If we have it, or even if they do them virtually, you still need to be able to prove
That's right. So in case some of you haven't heard it, just depending on what the decision is about our county fair, that there still will be a virtual experience, a virtual showcase type of experience. So like I said, we won't make the decision about what that would look like until we know about the county fair, but we are committed to having a virtual experience of some sort. Also, those of you who are interested in other gardening topics, like succulents you talked about, Liz, we'll be having a succulent class on Tuesday evening next week, and the information about that was in our Friday e-blast yesterday, so you can find the link there. So maybe you can learn a little bit more about succulents and how you can put them in your fairy garden and the care of them too. The question is, do you have any succulent fairy gardens, Liz?
I do. I do use succulents in my fairy gardens.
Do you have one close by that you could show us, or are they outside?
I don't have any planted right now. No.
Okay. But as you said, there you can use lots of different types of plants in your fairy garden.
Correct. And I shouldn't say don't use succulents and regular plants. In my larger fairy gardens outside, I will have succulents and regular plants mixed, but I keep them far enough apart so that when I'm watering my regular plants, I don't overwater my succulents. But succulents get the rain just like everything else, and they seem to do just fine outside.
Right. And we'll learn more about that on Tuesday evening for those of you who would like to join us. So any last thoughts for us, Liz, or important information they need to know about the fairy gardens?
No, just have fun and use things that you can find around the house. Don't make sure that you ask before you take anything, but you can use pretty much anything in a fairy garden.
That's great. Well, Liz, I want to say thank you for teaching us about fairy gardens today. It's been really great having you jump in and provide these virtual workshops for us. I know that we've learned a lot. So I appreciate everyone being here today. If you haven't answered the poll questions, go ahead and do that. And otherwise, we're going to wrap it up. Or if you have any last questions, you can type those in the chat box too. We'll stick around here for a few minutes. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you soon at a virtual learning opportunity near you. Thanks for coming.
You done?
I didn't know.
Oh, you did?
Oh, plus